Okay, I want to know about the relationship between Earth and Saturn, and in particular the relationship between, if there is one, the beings on Saturn and the elite on Earth. Okay, this is sort of pertinent to my book. Okay, so let's see what we got. Greetings and thank you for the question. You wish to know what is the relationship between the planets Saturn and Earth in your solar system, and in particular, what is the nature of the relationship between the elite on your Earth and Saturn and the beings originating from Saturn. Let us start by saying that there is a protective field around Saturn which has been put in place to deliberately impede psychic insight into what occurs on Saturn. It is deliberately shrouded in secrecy. So even to us, not all is known. However, we can say that Saturn has life, and that life began organically as part of the solar system experiment. It was in a state of spiritual dichotomy with the intention that it would find the light over time, just as occurred in the Venus iteration of the same experiment. However, when the Saturnian sentient race was still in a very early developmental stage and still unawakened to their relationship to the light, the solar system experiment was corrupted. The Venetian experiment was allowed to go to completion without interruption because the solar system was protected from those who would be opportunistic and exploitive from entering. But there was a significant astronomical event which disrupted those who had been tasked with guardianship of the solar system to maintain the integrity of protection momentarily, and during this window the opportunists entered the solar system and entrenched themselves on Saturn, and they did this without necessarily breaking any rules. They had not crossed any lines which put them in a state of legal responsibility, and instead they cleverly, working within the accepted rules of existence in the federational bodies that cooperate and an interstellar capacity to maintain a code of moral and ethics which help to integrate the different cultural beliefs that the many planets and systems involved maintain. And so, these opportunists were able to enter the solar system and then to set up shop, so to speak, on Saturn, and then begin a program of slow influence and indoctrination over the Saturnians without transgressing any of these rules, these codes of moral and ethic which have been accepted by all those within this Federation. Primarily, it is through choice and free will that they manipulate. And so the basic strategy is to offer something in return for cooperation. And the Saturnians were identified by the opportunists for their capacity for spiritual dichotomy, and in particular some Saturnians were included in this strategy on the basis of their control, their authority, and also their propensity to explore the darkness without as much hindrance from awareness of the light as perhaps other Saturnians would. And so, this elite class of Saturnians were embellished in their wealth, power and authority through the guidance of the opportunists, and over a period of time subjugated the entirety of the planet of Saturnians into a system of absolute control, where the people of Saturn are diminished in their understanding of self, live in a state of perpetual darkness and ignorance to the light, because in this state they are a fertile garden bed for the darkness, which is then harvested in a sense and used by the opportunists to power the systems of control and agenda accomplishment. However, this subjugation and suffering that has been thrust upon the Saturnians has been done at the hands primarily of the Saturnian elite. And so the opportunists are absolutely free of the karmic implications of what has been done, because it has not been they themselves that have done it, but instead they have been simply guides to the Saturnian elite who have done it to their own people. And the Saturnian elite have themselves also adopted the strategies of the opportunists in the form of a religion which has much ritual and ceremony with the intention of releasing themselves from the consequences of the actions they take. So it is, in a sense, a circumvention of the repercussions of the fourth law. And the fourth law of creation is, what you put out is what you get back. However, this law, the repercussions of this law, can be circumvented if those over which you are foisting your control to induce suffering for the purpose of furthering your own agenda, if it can be done in a way where it is not literal control, but instead the victims of your system submitting and choosing to be controlled and continuing to go along with your agenda even when the intent of the agenda has been exposed to them, then it is no longer a matter of those who oppress receiving back in equal measure of what they have given, because what they have given is no more than choice. It is the option. And then those who are victim to this system have accepted the choice, have made the choice. And through this methodology, this fourth law is circumvented, because there is nothing to come back on the basis of what is given out, because nothing has been given out other than choice. And so what is returned is choice, is option, is a greater capacity to do more of what they wish to do. So now, on planet Saturn, there is an entire race of beings which have been subjugated for a very long time into a state of willful slavery. They are controlled by fear and regulation, which they themselves have accepted because they were led to believe the regulation and control which they were offered as a choice and then accepted was for their own good, would keep them safe from that which they had been led to fear. And the elite of Saturn have become extraordinarily accomplished in the practice of metaphysical art, which comes from the wielding of darkness as a spiritual power. And now, working as minions of the opportunists, they communicate with the elite on Earth to implement the very same strategy which was implemented with great success on Saturn. Once again, using fear to implement a system of control and oppression which is chosen by the people of Earth It is what they have willfully accepted. And are done with such delicacy that there is not repercussion, but instead a slow and steady march to a state very similar to what has occurred on Saturn. However, there has been significant manipulation of the Earth human genome. It is a composite of many races incorporated into the one being to enhance its capacity for awakening to the light and resisting the temptation of the darkness, to have a greater capacity for empathy and compassion, and a greater capacity to resist fear. Yet even so, the Earth has been led in the direction of the dark polarity for a long time. But that time is coming to an end. It is apparent to all those that observe that the outcome on Earth is going to be a birthing into the light. Unlike what has occurred on Saturn. The gods of Saturn, which have been celebrated on Earth, are not the elite themselves, but rather the opportunists, who even now still reign as the supreme in the hierarchy above the Saturnians. And the Saturnians have committed, the Saturnian elite have committed to forever prostrate themselves to the opportunists in the reverence that is offered to divine beings, to deities. And so this religion of worship, the lesser being worshipping the greater being, has been transferred in a sense to Earth. However, the pathway of birthing of darkness on Earth was interrupted to a great extent by the appearance of a single being given the name Jesus Christ, who demonstrated the capacity of light, who awakened in humanity as a whole, as a single being, the experience of light. And this phenomenon which continues on today on your planet was a significant interruption in the religions of darkness, which were increasing in sophistication and penetration into the human culture. In ritual, the Earth Elite make a contact with the Saturnian elite, who are an older race with a much more conversant relationship with the darkness, and the Earth Elite communicate with them to receive guidance, and the exchange is they give, the Earth Elite give darkness as an energy through the ritualized suffering of innocence, which the Saturnian elite then give as tribute to their gods, and the Earth human elite receive in return for this offering of dark energy specific guidance regarding the strategy that they should implement to further their agenda of total global domination. And eventually, once the earth has been totally subjugated and all of humanity has been taken care of, which includes a mass culling or genocide, and then the total enslavement of those remaining, when this has been accomplished, the promise to the elite is that their overlords shall come to the earth, and they will be able to sit at the shoulder of their masters, and learn directly from whom they considered to be divine beings of great intellect and mastery of darkness. And once this union is made, then the earth human will have earned themselves partnership in a larger enterprise spanning an entire empire. They will become an entire battalion within the opportunist garrison. And will become entitled to a share of all that is reaped. But to earn this place, they must complete the subjugation of humanity. They must prove that they can accomplish this agenda to earn their right of initiation as a full partner into the larger enterprise, just as the Saturnians did. But what is becoming obvious is that the light on planet Earth has a greater capacity to self-awaken than was encountered on Saturn and Mars. And so, the opportunists are already strategizing as a contingency how to exit the solar system and abandon the Earth project, and perhaps even the Saturn project. Is there more you wish to know? Yes, what would cause them to abandon the Earth project? Their continued presence is dependent upon the balance of light and dark. While the balance is towards darkness, then the Earth is still a mineable asset. And so it is not the Earth itself which is mined for darkness, but rather it is the sentient species, the 8 billion inhabitants of the planet, when they are misconceiving of self as darkness, and so they hold darkness within self, then this is a harvestable resource. And as long as the primary state of the Earth human field is harvestable, then they will maintain their presence and continue to push forward their agenda. However, if there is a reverse, if there is a reversal of this balance between light and dark towards the light, which they are unable to flip back in the direction of their preference, and they continue to see a depleting return from their asset, then they will choose to abandon the project. And they will abandon because it becomes untenable in a economic sense, and also when there is a movement to the light, there is an awakening to the truth. There is a new capacity to see with a penetrating vision, which puts them at risk of discovery. And the consequences of such a discovery is something they wish not to be present for. They work very, very carefully to avoid the repercussions of the fourth law. They, as carefully as can be, make sure that what they give out is not going to incur the debt of receiving back the same. However, it is a very delicate balance. And when there is a moving landscape such that the light is awakening within those they are deceiving, then the equation, the algorithm, in a sense, is also continuously shifting. And so it becomes difficult. Because when a being is more of the light, less of the darkness, then it becomes more complex, more challenging to lead them through choices which are serving to the subjugator, harmful to the victim, without incurring the repercussions of the karmic debt of the fourth law. So if the transition away from darkness into light becomes sufficient, then it becomes too risky to continue along these strategic lines, because they will start incurring karmic debt. Putting themselves in jeopardy through the manifestation by themselves of an outcome which is detrimental to themselves. And this is what is occurring in the Earth experiment. Despite how careful they have been, there is now this transition deeper and deeper into the light by the human race. And the opportunists are losing hope for getting the outcome which they were successful in getting on Saturn. And so, more and more they are washing their hands and turning their eyes to other locations within the scope of their capacity to travel for opportunities to exploit, to further their own agenda of service to self through the corruption of other beings. The elite on Earth are now in a state of desperation because they do not have the capacity to abandon the project and leave, because this is their home planet. In a sense, they have pooped where they sleep, and now they must contend with the repercussions of having done what they have done. And so they enter a state of panic because they realise this awakening which is occurring is algorithmically shifting the way in which the fourth law is occurring. Because the greater the ignorance, then the more easily it is to escape the repercussions of the fourth law. However, in a state of wakefulness, in a state of truth, the fourth law eventually cannot be circumvented. In a state of absolute truth, of absolute awareness of the light, the fourth law cannot be escaped. So they are in a position now where if they stop what they are doing, then they will absolutely eventually be discovered, because the awakening of the light in the human field and the insatiable thirst for truth, it has now reached a state of momentum where it shall never stop. So even if the elite rescind what they have done and discontinue pushing forward, the momentum of the awakening of the light of the rest of humanity and their insatiable desire for the truth will not end until all has been revealed. And yet, however, if the elite continue to push forward with their agenda in the presence of this explosion of light, then they are opening themselves up to the repercussions of the fourth law, and so shall manifest by their own actions their own demise. And so there is great panic, there is great dread, there is great despair in the elite, because they realise they are in this catch-22 situation. They are doomed. And many who are very conversant in the ways of darkness have fully realised that they have already failed, because there is no escape from this catch-22 situation. However, those who are less conversant in the metaphysical rules and parameters around which this agenda has been constructed continue to push forward with the agenda in the panic to get it done before there is enough of pushback, where they are physically taken from their locations and locked away for being dangerous and nefarious to the rest of humanity, not realising that the harder they push to bring about this agenda, then the more they activate the repercussions of the fourth law of creation. So in a sense, they are trying to dig themselves out of a hole. There will be no escape for them. And that is not said in a intent of a haunting threat, but rather through universal laws of give and take. It is not possible for them to go from where they are to where they wish to be without incurring the debt they have earned, without experiencing the repercussions they have manifest. It is the natural order. It is the mechanism of the universe. And their momentum in this direction cannot be undone. Because for it to be undone would be to steal from them and from the One the great and potent understanding, experiential intelligence that will be extracted from these experiences. So while it appears to be a tragedy for themselves, it is all intrinsic to the One's journey to fully understanding and knowing itself experientially. This is not an aberration, but instead it is part of the process of which we are all a part. And those that are of the darkness, the Saturnians, the opportunists, all of these beings originate from the light of the One and are playing their part so that the One may have the full diversity of experience of itself, so that it can know itself to completion. And so while in the paradigm of physicality, the actions of the earth elite, the Saturnian elite, the opportunists, may be perceived as dark and horrible, it is in fact a divine contribution which is necessary for the One to reach the completion of the divine purpose of which we are all a part, integrated into the One Being, which we all are. So, do not hate your enemy. Do not hate those that choose to condemn you to suffering, because they are born from the light just as you are. And prior to their birth into this physical incarnation you know them as, they made the choice to be born into the life and role and circumstances where you find them now, because they knew they would be able to contribute to the awakening of the One by playing this specific role. And by playing this role in the era of ascension, they have essentially sacrificed themselves so that you may awaken, move to the light, and be included in the ascension. Their choice of intense darkness is intended to be the polarizing force pushing you into the light so that you may be harvested into the ascension and begin existing as a fifth dimensional being. This is the sacrifice that they have made. So, in the expanded sense, nobody loves you more than the most evil, because it is their sacrifice, being chosen to be born into a life, knowing they would be polarized to the darkness because of the familial conditions they were born into. They were born into the families of the elite, knowing they would polarize to the darkness and not be included in the ascension. They have made this choice so they can be the intense, darkly polarizing force that pushes you and the rest of humanity into the light. So we shall be harvested into the ascension event and become fully realized as fifth dimensional beings. So, although there is intrigue about who is good, who is bad, what is their intention, why are they doing this to me, whose rules are they following, who are their bosses, while there are these many levels of intrigue, ultimately, everything wants to return to the One. And the role they are playing now in this lifetime is nothing more than their contribution on the stage of life, which is the illusory context which provides a platform for contrast for the One to experience itself through the illusion that there is more than one. In this ongoing unfolding of the realization of what the One is experientially. Because we are all the One. The elite are the One. You are the One. The Saturnians are the One. The opportunists are the One. It is all the One being, playing a role, such that us, the perspective of this one thing, has been given a unique sentience, such that it believes it is a separate being, that it is a unique existence. However, in the most extrapolated sense, most expanded sense, there is only one being interacting with itself, because it wants to know itself to completion. So love all aspects of this one thing, regardless of how they present, because it is all a game, it is all illusory, it is all smoke and mirrors to create a matrix of potential to know thyself experientially to completion. Thank you.